and we're going to combine our knowledge of variables and numbers to create. Hello there, you beautiful people, and welcome to the world of variables. Variables are an incredibly useful concept in programming, and they help us store information in our code and generally just make programming a whole lot simpler and a lot more fun. So making sure you understand what variables are is going to open up a whole world of possibilities to you. So let's get cracking, shall we? In this lecture, I'm going to use an easy-to-remember analogy to explain to you what variables are in everyday terms, and I'm also going to explain to you why variables are so useful in our Python programs. After you've gotten the fundamental understanding down of what variables are, we're going to jump right in and create a few variables of our own to see how they work in real-life practice. By the end of this lecture, you should have a good grasp of what variables are and also how to create them in Python. You'll also understand how to find a variable's type, and you'll also learn how variables in Python are different from variables in other programming languages such as C or Java, for example. All very useful stuff, so let's get into it. So what are variables? Well, I want you to think of variables as little boxes. And just like regular normal boxes, variables can store stuff. In our computer programs, the boxes store certain values, also known as data. This data can be anything from numbers and words to videos and images, but the cool thing about variables is that they all have a uniquely identifiable name, and we use this name to see what's in the box, i.e. to get the data. So now that we're thinking of variables in terms of little boxes, let's go ahead and actually create our first variable. Now in Python, just like in every other programming language pretty much, a variable has two things. It has a name, and it has a certain value. So if you think of a variable in terms of a box, the name is the name or the text you write on the outside of the box, and the value is what you put inside it. Okay, now the first thing we need to give is our variable a name. So for this instance, let's just call it number, and all we have to do is just type in the name there. Now to put a value inside that box, we need to assign the variable a certain value. Okay, so the way that we assign a value is to use the assignment operator. Makes sense, right? Now it sounds really fancy, but the assignment operator in Python is simply just an equal sign. And now let's say we wanted to assign the variable called number the value of 1. What we would do is we'd type the number 1. Now what you can see here, let's break it down. We're saying let's create a box with the name number and put inside that box the number 1. Or assign that box the value of 1. Pretty straightforward, right? Now what makes this useful is that when I hit enter, you can see that we've gone to another line, as you can see by these 3 chevrons, these 3 arrows here. What has happened is, whenever I type number into the shell or into our program and press enter, we get back the number 1. By typing the variable name, we have looked inside the box and taken the value inside the box out. This allows us to store the value for later in a very convenient and easy to remember way, and that's what makes variables so powerful. Now there's something very important that you need to keep in mind when working with variables in Python, and that's that the variable names are case sensitive. So for example, like here when we type number in all lowercase, that worked. Okay, we got our value 1 back because we defined it all lowercase up here. But if I tried to type number all uppercase and press enter, we see that we get what's called a name error, saying number not defined. And what that means is Python basically couldn't find a variable with the name number in uppercase because we never defined it with that name in that case. So when you use variables in the future, just make sure you spell them exactly the way that you define them, because this trips everyone up once in a while. Okay, and another thing to bear in mind is that in Python, variables are dynamically typed, or Python is a dynamically typed language. Now what the hell does that mean? So let me just break it down. Each variable can have a certain type, and you can find that by using what's called the type function. So if I type type and number, it'll tell me it is an int or an integer, which is just a fancy word for a number, okay? Because it holds the word, it holds a number variable type. Now, when I say the Python is dynamically typed, that means the type of our variables can change. Now, this is different to other programming languages like Java and C, which are statically typed. In those languages, you have to say what type of data this variable is going to take when you define it. In Python, you don't have to do that. Basically, you can change the type of data that goes inside the box. So to give you an example of this dynamically typed nature, let's take our variable called number and assign it the value of hello, for example. I know that's quite confusing, but let's do it anyway. Now you can see that we didn't get an error. Okay, hello is a type of, well, it's text, isn't it? It's what's called a string data type. If we look at the type now, it will tell us that the class is str, or string, which is basically just text. Now, the fact that we could do this and basically overwrite our variable with a completely different data type is what I mean by dynamically typed languages. Statically typed languages don't allow you to do this. The reason this can be confusing is if I looked at someone else's code and they used a variable called x, for example. I don't know whether x is a string or it's a number or it's an image or whatever else it is, because it's a pretty bad name. But if they called it image or something, then that would make it a lot easier for me to know what went in that place in the code. So by making sure that your variables have good names, you're going to basically get the best of both worlds. You're going to be able to take advantage of Python's dynamically typed nature, and you're going to avoid the drawbacks of having confusing, ambiguous code. We covered quite a lot in this lesson, so let's take a quick recap to make sure that we've got everything. First of all, we introduced you to what variables are and said they were basically like little boxes in our programs that store information. Each variable has a name and is assigned a certain value using the assignment operator. Python's assignment operator is the equals sign. Remember, what's on the left of the equals sign is the variable name, and what's on the right hand side is the variable's value. That's what's stored in the box. We then went on to mention that the information that a variable can store has a certain type, such as a number or text. Because Python is a dynamically typed language, this means that the type of data that a variable holds can change dynamically. This is different to other programming languages like Java or C, which are statically typed, and that means the variable type is defined upfront and cannot be changed. It's static. We also created our very first variable and retrieved its value, which was pretty cool. We also used the type function to find the variable type that our data is. And Python told us that number was a number. Hello there, you beautiful people, and welcome to this lecture where you're going to supercharge your understanding of variables to a whole new level. After getting an introduction to variables in the last lecture, we're now going to go ahead and use them in a real example. Make sure to follow along for maximum learning. In this lecture, we're going to make our previous code a lot more organized by using variables. In this way, you get to see a before and after example to really understand why variables are so useful and why using them is much better than what we've been doing before. Let's go! Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do is boot up idle, and once you've done that, head over to the File tab and click Open. Now, if you've made a file directory like mine, it's going to be on the desktop, so I'm going to browse there, desktop Python Bible, and here we are, meetingidle.py. So if I double click on that, well, hey, there we are, that's the code that we made a few lectures ago. So let me just maximize that. So let's run it again to get an idea of what this script does. As we can see, the script prints out the number 2 and the number 115. This is all good, but what if we wanted to keep those numbers for later? Well, for this, we're going to need variables. Remember, variables are like boxes, so we can put the value inside the box and keep it for later. Let's say we wanted to call our first number the imaginary name of first number. The way we do that is we'd get rid of this whole print function here, and we'd type first number with an underscore, then equals 1 plus 1. So what's going on here? Well, in the middle, we have our assignment operator, the equals sign. On the left-hand side, we have our variable name, which is first number, and on the right, we have 1 plus 1. 1 plus 1 is what is called a Python expression. Python is going to evaluate the expression, basically find out what it is, and then store the result in the box called first number. What this means in plain English is that Python will do the calculation on the right and get the answer 2. Then it will store the answer 2 inside the box called first number, or inside the variable called first number. We can then use the variable name to refer to this value at any point in the future. So what we can do is, instead of print 1 plus 1, we can just use print first number. Here, Python will look inside the box called first number and find the number 2. And it will then print the number 2 to the screen. So you can see we get exactly the same answer as when we just printed the answer directly, but by using variables this time. We can do this for the second value, and let's call that the equally imaginative name of second number. So what we do, we get rid of our print function and type second number equals 105 plus 10, making sure to get rid of that trailing bracket there. So Python is going to evaluate the expression on the right hand side and get the result of 115. The value of 115 will be stored in the box called second number. And now when we use the print function, but put second number inside it, Python is going to see what's inside second number, it's going to see the number 115, and print that out to the screen. We see exactly what we saw last time, it works just as expected, and both numbers are printed on the screen just like before. If you got exactly the same as me by following along, then well done, you're basically becoming a boss at using variables. I just want to make a note here about naming variables. Sometimes variables have long names, and they contain multiple words like ours do. There are multiple common ways to name variables in programming. For example, there's camel case, which looks like this, or there's another type of camel case, which is like this. However, the most common way to name variables in Python that have multiple words in them is just to add an underscore in between each word, like we've done here. There mustn't be a space in your variable name, so we can use the underscore instead. It's common for a variable to be all lowercase in Python, so we'll use that style going forward in the course. Having a common style for naming variables isn't required, but it makes your code a whole lot easier to use, and a lot easier to read as well, and it stops you making as many errors. Oh, one other thing I should mention is that variable names can't start with a number. For example, I can't create a variable like this, but I can type this, because this starts with the letter A instead of the number 1. This is just something to bear in mind as you name your variables. Just make sure they always start with a letter. Now, with that out of the way, what makes using variables any better than just typing out the value? I mean, our program works just the same as before, right? Why bother making variables? Well, imagine if we wanted to do some calculations and add the answers together. We might make a variable called total and set that equal to the first number plus the second number. Now, when we print total, what we're going to see is 117 come up, because 117 is 2 plus 115. So what happened here? Well, let's break it down step by step, although it may very well be apparent by now. Python sees that it needs to evaluate the expression on the right-hand side of the assignment operator here and put the answer inside the box called total. The first thing Python sees is the variable called first number. Python looks inside that box and sees the number 2 inside. Next, Python sees that it needs to add whatever's in the box called second number. Python looks inside the box called second number and sees the number 115. So now Python knows it needs to add together 2 and 115. It does so and comes up with the answer 117. 117 is then stored in the box called total. And finally, when we use the print function, Python looks inside total, sees 117, and prints that to the screen. So that's what's going on pretty much in the entire program. So as you can see, by creating variables to store important information, we can make our information much more reusable and easily findable because we can give it very convenient names. Also, look at how much easier it is to change our code. If we wanted to add 5 to the first number, we can do that. And when we run our script, we see that not only the first number changes, but so does total. By using variables in this way, we can actually, by just changing 1 or 2 lines of code, create massive changes all the way through the rest of our program. Now everyone... Congratulations on completing the quiz and the coding challenge. I hope everything went well and you're now super confident that you fully absorbed everything there is to know about Python variables. So let's have a quick review of this section of the course to make sure that you've gotten absolutely everything before we move on. Firstly, and most importantly, you learned that variables are used to store useful pieces of information in your computer programs. Variables are like boxes, and each variable has a name and also has a value stored inside of it. We give variables values and names using the assignment operator, which in Python is just an equals sign. You also learned that variables have a certain type, and because Python is a dynamically typed language, this variable type can change dynamically. This is different to languages like C and Java, which are statically typed languages and don't let you do this. You can check a variable's type by using the type function, which makes complete sense, right? You also learned that how the name of your variables can impact the readability of your code, and I suggested to you that you stick with Python's convention and keep everything lowercase, and if you need a space, use an underscore instead. Oh, and bear in mind that the names need to start with a letter, they can't start with a number or a symbol. After that, you applied your knowledge of variables and updated the script we made earlier on in the section to make it more organized and a lot easier to change. And after that, you had a quiz to check your knowledge and you got your first taste of a coding challenge which you passed with flying colours. I mean, wow! What a lot you've covered in just this section alone. Well done! If you've followed all of that, then you're truly a master of Python.